Finally, the old man's gone, and I feel relieved. Despite being all about money, he clung to life persistently, and he was such a nuisance.
As my father's funeral, who passed away recently, was beginning soon, my brother, Kevin, said this with a smirk on his face. Our father was the one who paid for your debts, so how can you even talk about him like that?
Shut up. He just wouldn't pass away, and the medical bills and everything were too much. Now I can freely use his money.
You're terrible. After leeching off Dad so much?
Say whatever you want. You don't have anyone on your side anymore. You're useless now, so just leave.
Kevin, how could you? Tom approached my brother, but my sister-in-law, Catherine, who's also Kevin's wife, who was there, said this to us with a laugh. Someone who's married off elsewhere is no longer family, right? I bet even my father-in-law wouldn't want to be sent off by strangers like you. So just go home already. Something inside of me snapped after hearing what Catherine had said. To insult my father and furthermore deny our family ties like that is just too much. These people are rotten to the core. Speaking any further to people like them are just pointless. Besides, I definitely didn't want to cause any more commotion and ruin my father's funeral. I desperately held back the rage that felt like it was on the verge of exploding. Fine, I understand. Barely managing to utter those words, I decided to forego my final goodbye to my father and leave. I resolved in my heart to never associate myself with these people again. My name is Emily. I work as a nurse at a children's hospital. I married Tom, a radiology technician I met at work a few years ago. Despite our busy schedules with night shifts and on-calls making it difficult to find time together, we cherish every moment we can spend together. The job of a radiology technician who takes images that are essential for the diagnosis and treatment of diseases and other medical conditions for patients is a very responsible one. Handling numerous screenings daily, capturing every minute of details without missing any abnormalities, certainly comes with significant stress. Despite the demands of his job, I deeply respect Tom for working hard every day. Even amidst his busy schedule, Tom tells me that he respects how I always strive to connect with children and their parents or guardians with care and kindness. In the past, I never imagined I could be of such help to others like this, nor did I ever dream that such happy days would come my way. My father worked for a major trading corporation and was stationed overseas when I was young. As a result, my mother, my older brother, and I had no choice but to live, just as the three of us. And during those times, my mother and brother treated me almost like a slave. Didn't I tell you to clean this up? You're so useless.
Hey Emily, go buy a juice now. You have 1 minute.
Such painful words and demands were a common part of my daily life. My mother, who adored my brother, treated me as if I was something she didn't need. Watching my mother's behavior as my brother grew older, he became more and more domineering and abusive towards me. I believe I tried my best to live up to their expectations even as a child. Yet, contrary to my feelings, both my mother and brother continued to look down on me. Even when my father returned from his overseas assignment during my high school years, their attitude towards me remained unchanged. While my father immediately tried to defend me, my mother and brother blamed everything on him since he had just come back. While you were gone, I raised these two on my own. And now, after you've done nothing to help, you dare to complain?
Don't act like you're my father now, after all this time. We have our own way of doing things, our own relationships here. That's how it's been all along. Don't act all high and mighty, butting in without knowing a thing.
Despite their arguments, my father could not reach a resolution with the two of them. And their anger, instead of being directed at my father, who was the breadwinner, began to turn towards me. Witnessing this, my father felt helpless against my mother and brother, fearing I would suffer even more. Even though he was present, my father regretted not being able to change their attitudes, and, with tears in his eyes, apologized to me saying,
"I'm sorry."
However, just having my father at home was enough to comfort my heart. Being treated as useless and a nuisance by my mother and brother, I was lost, unsure of my purpose in life, feeling like I was stuck in a never-ending dark tunnel every day. But my father comforted me with these words.
"Emily, you're not useless. You're not a nuisance. You're our family, and you deserve to be here."
Those words alone were more than enough. Even when I continued to be belittled and ordered around by my mother and brother, just having my father by my side prevented my heart from sinking into darkness like it did before. By the time I was about to graduate from high school, my mother told me to start working after graduation, and she didn't allow me to pursue studying in a university. My brother, who hardly studied, got into a private university and wasted his time there. However, when it came to making a decision that would impact my future, my father couldn't remain silent. He asked me what I wanted to do and told me that I could decide my own future. Having always been under the thumb of my mother and brother, I hadn't really thought about my future, but this time, I seriously considered it. I decided I wanted to pursue a profession that would allow me to help others, and from there, I became interested in nursing. When I conveyed my decision, my father discreetly arranged for my application fees, admission fees, and boarding accommodations to attend nursing school, while making sure that my mother and brother didn't notice about that. And so I was able to successfully enroll into a nursing school. Since then, I've only returned home when my mother passed away. However, I always kept in touch with my father after entering nursing school. When I received my job offer, passed the national examination, started dating Tom, and even when I decided to get married, my father rejoiced as if it were his own accomplishments. On the other hand, I was worried about my father being alone at home. Yet my father would adamantly tell me he was fine, dismissing my concerns. One day, my typically stoic father told me over the phone,
"Recently, I've been feeling a slight pain around the pit of my stomach."
Although he said slight, I was sure he was feeling a considerable amount of pain. With that in mind, I recommended he visit a hospital. A few days later, after undergoing an endoscopy, my father informed me that there weren't any issues. I felt relieved at his news, but my husband didn't feel the same. There's a possibility that endoscopy might not detect everything, so Tom suggested that it might be good to get a cancer screening just in case. I conveyed this to my father and urged him to get the examination. As a result, it was revealed that my father had pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis was still at a stage where the disease was still resectable, and so my father was hospitalized for surgery. Hearing the term pancreatic cancer initially plunged my world into darkness, but the surgery was a success. When Tom and I visited him in the hospital, my father, though visibly exhausted, greeted us with a smile. Just as I felt slightly relieved seeing my father looking healthier than I expected, the hospital room door suddenly flung open, revealing my brother and a woman standing there. My brother momentarily darted his eyes in our direction, but without acknowledging our presence, brazenly walked into the room.
"You're in the way."
As we remained seated, my brother made a gesture with his chin towards the door, as if telling us to leave. The woman next to him also waved her hands in a shushing motion. I instinctively felt that this woman must be Catherine, whom my brother had married. I had heard about my brother's marriage from my father. "We've just arrived. Can't you wait a little longer?" I retorted, but my brother sneered at me, contorting his mouth disdainfully.
"It's not like our father's condition will improve just because you talk to him."
"I know that, but I haven't had much of a chance to speak with Dad yet."
"Please, give us a little more time."
My husband tried to persuade my brother, but he bluntly responded,
"You're the guy who married Emily, huh? I don't care if you're a radiology technician or whatever. In the end, without doctors, nurses, and technicians like you, can't do anything, right? Don't act so high and mighty."
Saying that, my brother smirked triumphantly and sneered at us. Even though we hadn't left our seats, my brother began to say outrageous things to our father.
Dad, I've gotten into debt again. I'm counting on you to help me out this time too.
What? I was taken aback by my brother's words, letting out a surprised voice. Without showing any concern for our father's condition, my brother abruptly brought up the topic of money. And the fact that he said this time too indicates that he had made our father shoulder his debts in the past as well. Kevin, you should deal with the debt you made by yourself. Do you even realize what situation our father is in right now?
Oh, shut your trap. I'm letting Dad atone for his past sins, okay?
Atoning for what?
For leaving us alone during our childhood. He left us during our precious childhood years. I'm telling him to make it up to us with money. Isn't that generous of me?
What? I never thought that my own brother could be such a despicable person. I was stunned by my brother's words and couldn't find the right words to argue back. I have to do something. I'm the only one who can stop my brother here. Trying to find the right words to retaliate, the woman standing next to my brother, my sister-in-law, gives me a suspicious look. Who do you think you are, coming here and acting all high and mighty after marrying into another family? You're in the way, just go home. I was deeply irritated by Catherine's words, and I couldn't keep staying calm. Enough is enough. Forgetting we were in a hospital room, without thinking, I raised my voice.
Emily, calm down.
Tom immediately intervened, and I was startled. At that moment,
Emily, please leave for today,
my father said calmly, showing us a faint smile.
Thank you for today. Please come visit again another day.
Hearing my father's words, my brother and sister-in-law had smug expressions. I couldn't shake off the uneasiness of seeing my father with my brother and his wife together. However, feeling guilty about shouting in the hospital room, I decided it wasn't right to argue further and left the room. Days went by with a constant worry about what went down between my father and my brother. Then one day, my father developed complications. Just having the complications was a shock beyond measure for my father. On top of that, he couldn't eat properly and was both mentally and physically exhausted. Despite the attending doctor's best efforts, my father passed away a few weeks later. A grief I had never experienced in my life hit me. However, I wasn't given the luxury of time to mourn for him. Despite my father's death, my brother and his wife did nothing. As a result, Tom and I had to handle all the funeral arrangements. On the day of the funeral, while greeting the attendees and waiting for the funeral to begin, my brother had the audacity to smirk, despite being at a funeral.
I feel so relieved now that the old man is gone. Despite only having money, he lived so persistently and was a nuisance.
Our father was the one who paid for your debts. So how can you even talk about him like that?
Shut up. He took so long to pass away. The hospital bills and other expenses were just too much. Now I can freely use his money.
You're despicable. After constantly leeching off our father?
Say whatever you want. You don't have anyone on your side anymore. You're not needed here, so get out. Kevin, how could you?
Tom argued back to Kevin, but Catherine, who was there, said this to us while she laughed away. Someone who's married off elsewhere is no longer family, right? I bet even my father-in-law wouldn't want to be sent off by strangers like you. So just go home already. Hearing what Catherine had just said, something inside me snapped. To insult my father and then deny the relationship I had with him is just too much. These people are rotten to the core. Arguing with them any further would be pointless. And the last thing I wanted was to cause a scene and ruin my father's funeral. I struggled to hold back the anger that felt ready to explode within me. Fine, I understand. With only saying that, I decided to give up on my final farewell to my father and leave. I resolved in my heart never to deal with these people again. However, the next day, My phone kept ringing with calls from my brother and sister-in-law. I had a feeling I knew what they wanted, but I continued to ignore their calls. My brother never took an interest in me, so he had no way of knowing where I lived. If I kept ignoring him, he would eventually give up. Or so I thought. But my brother exceeded my expectations, hired a detective to track me down, and showed up at my apartment.
Hey, why aren't you answering your phone? I called you multiple times.
Come out already. Do you have any idea how hard it was for us to find you? As if venting the frustration from being continuously ignored, the couple burst into anger the moment they saw me. Without waiting for my response, they said what they wanted to say one after another.
Is what the lawyer said true? That all of Dad's inheritance goes to you?
That can't be right, can it? You're siblings, so the inheritance should be equally divided, right? If anything, you're the younger sister, so you should get even less. And seeing me silent, my brother shouted,
Say something.
I was amazed at how selfish he was, considering he didn't even give me a chance to speak. What the lawyer said is true. I was surprised when I was informed too.
You're lying. So you're saying that you're taking all of the $10 million Dad left behind? I will never allow that.
Whether you allow it or not doesn't matter. It's already decided.
Do you think you can talk to me like that? You've always been useless, and in the end, you couldn't even help out Dad. You should just do as I say for the rest of your life.
My brother refuses to face the truth, which is inconvenient for him, and is trying by force to somehow get his hands on the inheritance. However, such attempts are pointless, because our father had excluded Kevin from getting his inheritance. Didn't you hear from the lawyer? Dad specifically did not mention that you'd inherit his inheritance. Given all the unjustifiable things you've done, isn't that understandable?
That's not true.
Lies. You always said it was atonement and made Dad pay off all the debts you made from gambling. Besides, you used Dad's shareholder privileges without his permission and sold his belongings without any of his consent. Citing other reasons, such as the insults from my brother and sister-in-law, my father had taken measures to prevent my brother from inheriting any assets while he was alive. What you both have done is more than enough to lose your rights to inheritance. If you understand the situation, then leave. Never show up in front of me again. Although the couple was making a lot of noise, as they listened to me, it seemed they began to understand the reality. How I guessed that was because their faces were turning completely pale. Leaving them behind, I tried to return to my room, but Catherine screamed out as if seeking help. Wait! Please, share some of the inheritance with us! Seeing her still begging for the inheritance at this point, I gave her a cold look. Without waiting for a response, she began to blabber on. We bought a luxury condo thinking we would get a portion of the inheritance from your father. Excuse me? We thought we could pay it back immediately, so we borrowed money from a very shady source. If we don't pay it back soon, the interest is going to be insane. So please, share the inheritance with us. It seems that not only did they purchase the luxury condo, but ever since our father passed away, they've been recklessly gambling even more than usual and splurging on luxury brands. That's none of my concern. As I said that, my brother became flustered and shouted,
You've always done as I've told you. You should always listen to me.
When was that? I've changed since I started working, contributing to society, and meeting my husband who actually respects me. I'm not the same insecure person I was back then. Don't ever think that I'll always obey you and do as you wish. When I raised my voice, which was as loud as my brother's, he collapsed to his knees, still clinging to me with tears in his eyes. He's your own brother and he's asking for help. If you're family, you should help him. Catherine also raised her voice, trying to persuade me. However, I retorted sharply. Wasn't it you who called me an outsider? After insulting our father and denying the relationship that I had with him, I have no obligation whatsoever to help you any further. What's with your attitude? If you continue to stay around here, I'll call the police. Is that what you want? Ah! As soon as I mentioned the police, my brother and his wife vanished from our sight right away. Later on, when I met with my relatives, I overheard numerous complaints about my brother from them. During my father's funeral, my brother and his wife had acted inappropriately during the time they made a speech about my father, and they had terrible manners, which had left the entire family in disbelief. Apparently, after being informed by the lawyer that he had no inheritance rights, he went around asking all the relatives for my whereabouts. However, since no one told him, he ended up having to hire a detective. But even after going to the lengths of hiring a detective, things did not go as he had hoped with me. Desperate, he went around begging the relatives, pleading on his knees, asking them for money. Despite the relatives' astonishment at my brother's actions, they couldn't lend him money. As a result, it seems he and his wife fled somewhere to escape from their shady loan sharks. Months have passed since then. My brother and his wife continue to live a life on the run, constantly fearing being found by the loan sharks. Catherine must be frustrated with having a life like that. But unable to support herself, she can't leave my brother, and likely spends every day arguing with him. On the other hand, since we couldn't attend my father's funeral, we visited his grave every month. Thanks to my father's support, I was able to get a job as a nurse. And with Tom, whom I met there, I'm determined to cherish every day and do my best in everything I can.